Can you tell us the 5 things that make Binh Binh?
So it was hard to narrow down, but I came up with a list of 5 things, and the first thing is, of course, my parents. So, like I mentioned, I was born in Saigon and immigrated here when I was 1.5. And I am just so fascinated, one, by my ancestry and where I come from, but also all of the sacrifices that my parents made. So, being in Vietnam, post war, my parents both went through a lot of adversity. They had to go through a really traumatic time with living in a country that was at war and then having to move and completely rebuild your life and start all over again in a foreign country where you don't know the language. That stuck with me when I was younger, and that's something I recognized at a really young age. I also grew up very poor. My parents worked blue collar jobs to make sure that they could provide, a better future and an education path for my brothers and I. And so I feel like sometimes I carry the weight of everything that they've experienced in their lives on my shoulders. And so that has helped me just feel like even more ambitious and more driven to be successful and to use an opportunity of being here in this country and having an education in a way that can give back to them and make them feel proud. And so I brought in photos of my parents. So this is my mom, her name's Kim, and she is just like the light of my life. She will walk in a room and totally become best friends with everyone and anyone, and that's just like the type of person she is. Like I mentioned, even though we grew up super humble and didn't have a lot, she's the type of person where if she sees someone else who's in more need, she'll give the shirt off her back to someone else. So that's like someone who obviously has been very influential in my life. And then this one's a photo of my dad and I. He's also so fascinating. He knows 5 languages. He used to be a former English professor in Vietnam. He's a black belt karate sensei. He's lived so many different lives and has such like a fascinating story and is so wise and noble in who he is. And he's the one that really, when I was growing up, instilled in me that I can do anything and everything I want as long as I put my mind to it. He used to tell me, and I'll never forget, he'll say, Binh, if you think you can do something, you can. If you think you can't do something, you're right too, you can. And so it's all about your mindset. And so having that, even though we didn't have a lot growing up, having that love and support and belief in me and that mindset instilled in me is what built the foundation for who I am today. And so that's a large part of my story and the reason why I am where I am. And so, now being in a position where I have such an incredible job and I can give back to my parents and I get to take them on vacations and I get to treat them. That's like the joy and love of my life to be able to do that and why I do what I do. Second is my story at Temple. Like I mentioned, I grew up in a very rural area. There was not a lot of Asian people. There was not a lot of diversity. So stepping foot onto a campus where I met so many people with various walks of life, perspectives, backgrounds, it was completely eye-opening and completely transformed like the trajectory of my path. Temple also was just such a great place for me to develop my skills and get so much experience that built, the career path that I'm on today. And so I feel like I credit a lot of who I am and the development of who I am to Temple. I brought 2 things. One is just like a newspaper. This was like a moment, of course, at home. My mom has this framed somewhere in the house. And it was just a newspaper from when I got a 30 Under 30 award from Temple, of them featuring me as a young professional in the city. And it's just like a testament to what Temple's all about, which is a lot of the people who graduate from this school come from grittier backgrounds or are the first generation, first person in their family to graduate from college, or backgrounds that are not just like the traditional path. And so I feel like very proud to be a Temple Owl and to represent them as like a place I went to college. Third thing that I wanted to mention as like an impactful part of who I am is this book that I read called Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh. I've read this like 3 times. It is like my go-to favorite book. Thich Nhat Hanh was he had passed away, but he was a former Buddhist monk, and his philosophy was all about how you should live with abundance and in the present moment and not based out of fear. And so a lot of the teachings and how I've moved through the world have been, by a lot of the things that I've learned in this book. Fun fact, my full name is actually Binh Nguyen, and that means to have a peaceful day. My grandfather actually named that for me. And something really interesting, not to get us sidetracked, that I recently found out was just the ancestry and the lineage of where my grandfather came from. So my father, this is on his side, my grandfather was the Prime Minister of Customs for Vietnam, and his father, my great-grandfather, was the second in command for the last emperor of Vietnam, so the Nguyen dynasty, which my name comes from Nguyen. So I had no idea about any of this history before, and my dad recently told me, and I was like, what? So I was like, what is my great-grandfather's name? And I Googled him, and I found all these articles about him, how noble he was, how smart he was, and to know that my family lineage came from a level of royalty in a way, and to know that my grandfather and my great-grandfather came from a place of serving their country, serving their community, serving their people. They were such inspiring leaders back in their time, was just mind-blowing, because it was a part of my identity and a part of my story that I didn't know about before. But then once I found all of these things out, it made me realize, like, maybe that's where like my deep desire of my ambition comes from. Maybe it did stem from my great-grandfather. So knowing that my grandfather named me to have a peaceful day, that's how I move through the world and how I ground myself, is making sure that no matter what I'm doing, what room I'm in, what space I'm in, that I'm always feeling at peace and can spread that peace for other people too. So that's that book. Not related to this book, but just another book I wanted to give a shout out is called Boat Baby by Binh Nguyen. It's just a really easy, fun, and also insightful read for people who want to better understand the journey of a lot of Vietnamese Americans who came to the country and immigrated here after the war. So she depicts her story, and she's just an inspiration to know that you can come from so little and to then work your way up, believe in the dream. And now she's on national television, getting to inspire so many young Asian girls and women like myself is really cool. So it was a moment for me to have met her too, and to now get to read her book. And then I think the last 2 things I wanted to mention, which I did a little bit before too, was being a part of the AAPI community. So my first Asian American Journalist Conference was like totally mind-blowing, I would say. Like, I've never been around so many other Asian people before in my life, and so to be with hundreds and hundreds of other AAPI professionals and leaders who are also in media, communications, PR, and to get to talk to them and network with them and connect with them was just so inspiring and powerful for me. And it also made me realize that this is a community and a space that I want to eventually do more work in and make more of an impact in. So it was really special to meet this group of people, and now it's something I get to look forward to every year, where, you know, somewhere in the country, I think next year it's in Minneapolis, it becomes like a mini reunion where all of these API leaders and professionals get together and we get to catch up and also support each other in all of our like various ventures. The last thing, Vietnamese culture and heritage. You know, growing up in a rural area, I wasn't as connected to my culture because, you know, you're young and you're trying to assimilate and you would rather blend in with your friends than stand out and be different. And now growing up, I realize it's the opposite. Your differences are your superpower, that's your strength. And so I'm so much more in tune with my culture, where I come from, where I was born, and leaning into that more. And so it makes me even more grateful that when I was growing up, both my parents made me speak Vietnamese in the house. When I'm at school, I speak English, and when I'm at home, I spoke Vietnamese. And they were super, super strict about that, which I didn't understand when I was younger. And now looking back, I'm so, so grateful that I can speak my native tongue, that I can talk to my mom in Vietnamese and communicate with both of my parents and my family. And even my grandmother and my family in Vietnam, I get to talk to them, and that in itself makes you feel so much more connected to your culture. And so my roots and who I am as a Vietnamese American woman has really like been a core part of who I am and like who I'm still discovering and finding ways to connect to. Philly helps make it feel so much more normalized. The fact that we do have a little Saigon and such a massive Vietnamese population in South Philly, it's allowed me to connect and meet so many friends that I didn't have growing up. Now I have Vietnamese friends and we're able to connect and relate about our culture and our upbringing, and that portion of it is really, I guess, special for me. And the fact that my mom can, you know, when she comes up to visit me, go down Washington and she picks up her banh mi's from Balea and she goes to the Asian grocery store and she gets her BBH from Cafe Diem, and then she gets to come see me, like knowing that I get to have those experiences with my parents is really special too. And then not in Philly, but also super fun and special is my parents and I go to Orange County every year for Lunar New Year. Westminster in California is the largest Vietnamese population outside of Vietnam. And so they do a big Lunar New Year parade and there's night markets and it's so much fun, and we spend a week out there, and to be able to have that experience with my parents is really, really special and helps me be even more in tune with my culture and where I come from.